Welcome to Bias Hacking for Conversation Designers, the Vocalime series exploring how different kinds of cognitive biases interact with the work of conversation designers and offering insights on how to mitigate them. We'll be talking about mere exposure effect, the Dunning-Kruger effect, anchoring bias, and many others. But before we get to those, we need to understand why thinking about cognitive biases is so important for conversation designers, and what are the two different ways that biases affect our work. First important thing to understand is that no human is born in a vacuum, meaning we all naturally develop biases. In fact, despite the negative associations we tend to have with the notion of bias, cognitive shortcuts are actually born out of necessity. Grossly oversimplifying the neuropsychology of it all, we can say that if our brains would always have to compute and take time to interpret all the stimuli it receives, we would hardly be able to go about our days. Something as simple as figuring out how to walk up the stairs could take us minutes to ponder every time we find ourselves in front of them. Instead, our experience enables us to create shortcuts. These shortcuts are really handy as they allow us to quickly interpret or predict situations. This way, when we see stairs, we automatically know to raise our foot to the correct height, and that only once the first foot lands on the step, the other foot can follow. On the other hand, these shortcuts rely on assumptions that become normalized and are thus very difficult to become aware of. It's like a law that is imprinted in your brain to tell you how to process information around a certain topic. Your brain automatically then takes this law as true and normal. It would take a new and really convincing piece of information that questions that law for you to jump out of automatic mode and become aware of it. So some laws are like knowing how to climb stairs. They're necessary to process the reality we live in, and following them does not create negative consequences for others. On the other hand, other laws, like assuming that important roles in an organization should be covered by men, can, and in fact, do create really harmful implications on the reality we shape for ourselves and for others. Now, experienced designers, and in particular conversation designers, are in the unique position of both being humans, i.e., bias bearers, but also of creating interfaces that are meant to interact and support other humans, i.e., other bias bearers. This means that bias interact with the work of conversation designers in at least two ways. One, bias guide and sometimes cloud the conversation designer's own judgment, leading them to make assumptions, but also bias guide the end users of the interface that the conversation designer designs, leading them to follow these often irrational shortcuts to make decisions or to express themselves. Becoming aware of your own biases isn't an easy task, especially seeing how neatly they hide and become normalized in our perceptions. So I'm really not suggesting this job is easy or comfortable even, but as conversation designers, we should always try to push ourselves to do this job of keeping our own prejudices in check and being open to critique when we aren't able to become aware of them ourselves. On the other hand, biases also interfere with the end users of the very things we are designing. In fact, becoming aware of the cognitive biases that are common across humans can be pretty revelatory for conversation designers, also in this sense. Once you know which shortcuts might to some extent inform users' behaviors, you're actually empowered to design around them. These are two distinct aspects of the question of biases interference with the work of conversation design. And in the next episodes of Bias Hacking for Conversation Designers, we'll be exploring different biases, taking these two perspectives and offering recommendations in terms of how to deal with being a biased conversation designer and designing for biased users. This was it for us today. And so bye, or should I say bias for now.